Hi there, Johnny here. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to connect two buildings together using IPSEC. And then what we will do is at the end of the video, I'll show an example on how to share a folder between the two buildings. So this is a setup scenario we have. So for building 1, the WAN IP is 158.10.10.2, and then for building 2, we're going to have 164.20.22. And then the internal LAN for the building 1 will be 192.168.10, and then for building 2 will be 192.168.20. In both buildings, I've got a Linux machine that we will use to log into OpnSense and then set it up. And then in building 2, I've also got a Windows 10 machine, which we will create a share folder and then share that between the buildings. Yeah, so I'm going to start and open the Linux machines, and from there I'll open Firefox and then just log into the OpnSense instance on each building. Okay, for step 1, what we need to do is create key pairs. So under VPN, we're going to click on IPSEC, and then we're going to go to key pairs. Once that is open, we can click on the plus sign to create a new pair. So since this is building 1, I'm going to call it IPSEC and then B1. For the key type, it's up to you. You can choose if you want to use RSA or you can use the ECDSA. For this tutorial, I'm just going to stick to RCA. And since these virtual machines or nodes in EVNG aren't that powerful, I'm just going to keep it to something low, like 2048. But you can go higher if you like. Once you have selected that, we can click on the gear icon, and that will generate a key pair for us, a public and private key. What I'm going to do is copy the public key, and I'm just going to paste it in Notepad, or in this case, Kate. So we need this for future to copy it over to the second building. Okay, with that copied, we can click Save to apply it. Yeah, so now we can head over to the OpnSense in building 2, and we'll repeat the steps. So we'll go to VPN, IPsec, and then choose the key pairs option. Once that is loaded, we'll click on the plus button and then do the same thing. But in this case, we're going to call it IPsec B2. And once it's generated, I'll do the same. I'm going to copy the public key and then just paste it for future use. We can save and apply it. Once that is done, we can head back to building 1. So I'm going to copy the public key of building 2. I'm going to go over to the building 1, and I'm going to click the plus icon to create another key. This time I'm going to call it B2, so I know that it's building 2's key, and then under public key I'm just going to paste it. So this is the public key from building 2. We will now paste it here into building 1. That's it. You can click Save and Apply. Now we'll head over to building 2 and then do the same thing. I'm going to copy the public key of building 1. And in building 2, I'm going to click the Add New Key. I'm going to call it B1. And then under the public key, I'm going to paste that. Again, the private key will be blank. We can save and apply that. Okay, the second step is to create the connections itself. So we'll go under VPN, IPSEC, connections. Once you're in there, we can click on the plus icon to create a new connection. So for proposals, you can choose which encryption method you want to use. So there's quite a lot. So again, depending on the power of your hardware, you can choose better encryptions. But in this case, I'm just going to leave it as default, as that will be fine for the nodes in EVE-NG. The next thing we need to do is set the local address and then the remote address. So the local address will be the public WAN of building 1 in this case. So it'll be 158.10.10.2. And then the remote address will be the WAN IP of building 2. So 164.20.22. Okay, I'm going to give it a description. So we can call it, in this case, I'm going to call it 2B2. And once we're done with it, I'm going to click save. We can then head over to the second building and repeat these steps. Okay, so in building 2, we'll do the same. So proposals be default. Versions, I'm going to leave as both 1 and 2. So now in this case, the local IP will be the 164.20.22. And then for the remote, it will be the WAN IP of building 1. So 158.10.10.2. For the description, I'm just going to call it 2B1 and save it. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is add the local authentication and remote authentication. So back at building 1, we're going to click on the local authentication, click on the add. So for the connection, it will be the 2B2 one. For round, we leave it at 0. We don't change that. For the authentication method, we're going to change it to the public key. Since we're not using any certifications or certificates, we're going to leave that as nothing. Then what we're going to do under the public key, we're going to choose the local key. So in this case, we called it IPSEC B1. For the description, I'm just going to write B1 dash and then key. Now for the remote authentication, we're going to choose the B2 key. So again, we'll leave round 0. We'll change authentication to public key. Then under public keys, I'm going to select the B2 key. For the description, I'm just going to call it B2-key. And then we will save that. I'm going to now head over to building 2 and repeat the steps. So for local, we're going to choose public key again. And then for public key, it's going to be the IPsec B2. I'm going to write B2 key. And then for the remote, we're going to then choose the building 1 key. So again, we change it to public key. Under public key, we're going to select building 1. And then we give it a description. So B1 key. We can then save it. Now back to building 1, we need to add children. So basically what children are, it's telling OpnSense what traffic we want to route through this specific connection. So from where and then to where. So in this case, we're going to use policy modes. So we'll leave policies ticked on. Now what we want to do is say what local networks are allowed to use this connection. So since we only have one network, I'm going to use that. So it'll be traffic from 192.168.10.0.24 network. if it is trying to go to the remote network, which is 192.168.20.0-24. So that's the local network of building 2. So any traffic from our local 10 range, which is trying to go to a 20 range, we're going to allow it through or route through this tunnel. For the description, I'm just going to call it 2B2. Now we'll go to building 2 and repeat the steps. But now this time, for the local, it will be the 192.168.20.0 network. And the remote, so building 1's network, we want to connect to the 192.168.10.0.24 network. For the description, I'm going to call it 2B1. We can save that. Now if we go back to building 1, we can hit save. We must check the enable IPSEC checkbox and apply it. We'll go back to building 2, do the same thing, save it. Check the enable IPSEC tick box and then hit apply. Now if we go back to building 1, we can just go to the status overview. 1 is connected. And then phase 2, you should see a connection or a tunnel there. And that's correct. Okay, step 3 is to create the firewall rules. So we're going to go under firewall rules and IPSEC. So this is the firewall rules on the tunnel itself. So in this example, I'm going to allow all traffic through it, but in production, you should be more specific. So for example, if you're only allowing HTTP traffic, only allow HTTP, or if it's SMB, only allow SMB, so on and so forth. But just to make it easier on this tutorial or this video, I'm going to allow all. So we'll head over to building 2 and do the exact same thing. So firewall rules IPsec, and I'm going to let all RP version 4 traffic through. We can enable login. I'm going to give it a description as allow all, save and apply it. Okay, so back to building 1, we now need to enable these 3 specific rules on the WAN connection. So this again we're going to do in both buildings. So under the rules and WAN, what we want to do under protocol, we need to search for ESP. So we need to allow this through between the 2 buildings. Now we don't just want anybody to have access to that. So under the source, we're going to choose single host or network, and we're only going to allow ESP into the WAN from our building 2's WAN IP. So for the source, we will do the 168, we'll do 164.20.20.2. So we can tick log for any troubles shooting in the future. And then for description, I'm just going to label it ESP. Now what we can do is clone that rule. And we want to change the protocol to UDP. The source, again, make sure that it is set to the WAN IP address of building 2. And then under destination port range, we want to search for ISA KMP. I want to log it just in case we need to do troubleshooting later. And then for the description, You can call it what you want. I'm just going to call it IPSEC so that I know the specific rule is for IPSEC. And once again, we will clone that rule. And then for the destination port range, we're going to change it to IPSEC NAT-T and save it. Once saved, we can apply it. Now we can head over to building 2 and do the rules again. So now we're in building 2. We're going to go to WAN, create a new rule. And now for protocol, again, we'll search for ESP. For source, we're going to set it as single host or network. And now this time we're going to put in the WAN IP address of building 1. So 158.10.10.2. So again, we don't want this open to everyone on the WAN. We just want it open to the building 1. For description, I'm just going to call it ESP. We'll then clone the rule, change protocol to UDP. And then for the destination port range, again, we'll search for ISA KMP. For the description, I'm going to call it IPSEC again and save it. I will clone that rule and then change the destination port range to IPSEC NAT-T. We can then save and apply it. We can do a quick test. So at the bottom on building 3, I've just opened a terminal and then did a ping between this computer to the Linux node in the second building. Now if we go under the firewall logs, we should see some pings going through. So I'll head over to building 2, open firewall logs. I'll choose IPSEC as the interface, and then we should see the ping between the two networks. So now if I ping again, it should be going through, and you can see in the background there, the log has updated. So we now have ping from the 10.10 to the 20.10 computers. So if we check here on building 2, our machine is 20.10, which is correct. And then in building 1, if we check our IP address, it will be 10.10. So we've already got communication between the two Linux machines between building 1 and building 2. It's pretty cool. Okay, so now if we test again from building 2 to building 1, we should see that the ping also goes through. So we can communicate between the two computers. Okay, so we're going to set up an example. We're going to do some file sharing between the two networks. So in building 2, I've got a Windows machine which will have just a file shared, and we can then set it so that the building 1 can have access to it. So under the C drive, I created a folder called like and subscribe, and I've just set it to have basic sharing. If we go under the network properties of this machine, I've done the following. So the machine is under the private network, private firewall group, and our IP address is 20.11. Yeah, so if we go to building 1 and we use our Linux machine again, if we try ping this Windows computer, you will notice that it will not work. So I'm going to go ping 192.168.20 and then 11. You'll notice that we get nothing back. However, we do know that the tunnel is working. So let's see if we can connect to the Windows computer through SMB. So I'm going to open up the Dolphin file browser. I'm going to choose SMB, and then under the SMB we'll put in the IP address, so 192.168.20.11. But you'll notice that we do not get a connection. Now the reason is Windows by default sets its firewall to only allow traffic from the same network. So in other words, from 192.168.20.0 network. So what we need to do is go into the firewall, so the advanced settings under Windows, and we need to go through each service that we want, and we need to enable it to have access or to give access from other networks. So if we order the list by name and we scroll down, so for example, if you wanted ICMP or ping in, we would find that network and we would enable, we'll either set the network that we want access to it or just allow all networks to access it. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to allow all networks to access it, not just the local network. So we're going to go through every single file and print sharing service. We will double click on it. And if we go to scope, under the remote IP addresses, at the moment it's only set to local. What we want to do is either click on add and set the other networks that you want. So in this case, it could be 192.168.10.0 /24 if you wanted to allow just that network in. But for this example, I'm going to allow any IP address. Now what I'm going to do is go through every single one, and I'm just going to set the scope to allow all IP addresses. Just as a note, since we're only using SMB, you could just go to the SMB service and only allow it for that. But I'm just going to add all of them. Yeah, so this is the important one. So the SMB in. So this is technically the only one that we needed to do this for. Okay, now that it's done, we can go back to building 1. I'm just going to copy the address. I'm going to go back to network, and then I can paste that in and press enter. Now you can see it pops up asking us for a username and password to have access to that file. So if we go back to the Windows machine, my username is Jono, and then I'll put in my password. And if everything goes right and is correct, I should now see that share folder. And there we go. We can open the like and subscribe folder, and we now have access to the folder. So I can open up a picture. I'll create a text file. open it, and let's write something in it. We'll save it. And now if we go back to our Windows machine and look in that folder, we should see the text file. And there we go. Just like that, we've managed to share an SMB folder from a Windows machine in Building 2 to a Linux machine in Building 1. So if this video helped you, please consider liking and subscribing. I would appreciate it. It will help grow the channel. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.